the York County Health and Environmental Protection Committee to order. I don't know what the next step is after that.
Right. Y'all, it's good
I
to,
think-
yes, it's good to be here. Josh Edwards, County Manager. I'm not,
Sorry, the first item on the agenda is 10 minutes.
yeah, okay.
No,
You're
you
gonna
know,
do
the
Okay,
minutes.
you gotta do a minute, then. Yep.
Can I vote on the minutes? I wasn't here.
It's been a while.
Alright. So, first order is to approve the minutes from the December 5th, 2023 Health and Environmental Protection Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes is submitted.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
All right, y'all, so Josh Edwards, County Manager. One of the things I want to point out is it's been a long time since this committee met. So thanks y'all as a new committee that was just formed. Thanks for meeting right away. So that date you just read was 2023, okay? And one of the things I want to thank the committee that they did back then was make the recommendation to do a Parks Master Plan. And so Catherine and her team have worked hard to get that Parks Master Plan done as we presented it to y'all in a workshop in the fall. So today's meeting is really to re-engage with council on what that Parks Master Plan outlined. So we want to remind y'all what's in the Parks Master Plan in terms of recommendations from the consultant. So the items we're going to talk about tonight came directly from a consultant, not staff, not the manager's office, but we were bringing back the master plan because if you remember, council's action was to send this master plan back to committee as it originated from y'all, for y'all to talk about the implementation of the plan. So the presentation tonight really is following the recommendations of the consultant from Clemson. And we're open to have as many meetings as y'all want to have prior to the budget adoption this year. So my goal as manager is to present a balanced budget to y'all by our second meeting in April. And so we've got about 3 months if you think about it. But really what I would push y'all to think about is we've got 2 more months from today. I really want to have our budget lined up so that staff can finalize it in a format for y'all to consider by early April. And so we need y'all's help over the next 2 months. So this is your January meeting. I hope you have a meeting each of these months and help us work through these items. So the items we're wanting to work through today are twofold. First, we want to talk to y'all a little bit about the rec tax, as that's been a conversation point. I know many of our friends joined us tonight because of that. And so that's been a conversation point the last couple of budgets. My goal, as I shared with y'all our last workshop and the budget guidelines, this really is one of those items we need to sort out before we get to the 3 readings of the budget. That's not what we've done in years past, which has led to more conversations and confusion at the end of the budget process. I'm trying to deal with that with y'all now over your next 3 meetings. In addition, there's a number of other recommendations in that Parks Master Plan that Catherine's going to walk us through and have conversations so that y'all can consider and give feedback so we as staff can go do work and bring it back to you in a month. So I see committees work best when y'all tell us what you need. Don't feel like you got to rush to any decisions. We go get that information, we bring it back, and y'all can give us more feedback, and if you feel like you have what you need to make a recommendation, then we can move forward. So that's really our goal tonight, is to go through those 2 items, get a sense from y'all on what you need to make a decision and a recommendation. If you feel like you already have that, and we can talk about that tonight as well. Or if you need more time, I would always encourage you to be thoughtful and take your time. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Tom, our Assistant County Manager over Development Services, to talk a little bit about the rec tax.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate the opportunity. And I will begin by saying I feel very ennobled to be here in York County. Wonderful place, warm and friendly people, and I feel very welcome. Getting right in to try to lend a little bit of credibility, even though, and for those of you who are recreation professionals in the room, I will not pretend that I am one. I'm a manager by trade, but instead, I can lend some credibility because I've had the opportunity to work in some very robust parks and recreation departments in Georgia. In fact, the county I left, which was probably a third of York County size population-wise, but we were the first public recreation program in the state of Georgia outside of Metro Atlanta. So Statesboro and Bullitt County had a very long legacy of providing parks facilities and recreations programming. We have some neat retail facilities like the mixed-use ag arena and a water park, a regional park, and a series of community centers, neighborhood parks, and even pocket parks. So I'm very familiar with recreation programs and generally recreation funding, and I've always been very supportive of parks and recreation. And I know that people like you, some of you all in the audience, and Catherine who work in the profession, have a lot of pride in what you do because you leave legacies to the community. Now, saying all that, here I've landed in York County, and as I landed, I think the master plan had just finished. And now I'm beginning to try and unravel how Parks is funding. And you know, your department is a fledgling department, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. That's just a fancy way of saying it just got started. And as it's trying to form osmotically and otherwise, the county has been very aggressive through different means with land acquisition. And with all of the land that you have acquired, and I haven't been to all of the parks yet, I've been to several around Lake Wiley, but I haven't been out to Catawba and a couple other places that I do want to definitely see. I just think you have wonderful opportunities, and a lot of the land can be very much developed with parks amenities, but then some of it you may want it to remain very passive, or perhaps even like wildlife management areas. But as we get into the master plan, and when we think about at the county level funding for parks and recreation, the placeholder seems to be this recreation tax that's been in place since 2005, and I think it may have been amended or slightly amended in 2022. But my recollection is, and again, the county has a very complex funding scheme. Have you ever seen a cat get into a ball of yarn? Or see the product after it's done? That's what I'm trying to do, is get the ball of yarn back together so I can understand it, so I can do my financial knitting with it, if you will. But the original ordinance set a millage rate cap, actually, at 1.5 mils, and that generates approximately 1.65 million annually. And you can see from the 2025, fiscal 2025, how it was allocated countywide to the municipalities and Lake Wiley. And ultimately, the county council threw in some additional excess funds that were either in the account or part of the cash fund balance. Yeah, that they were able to establish that level of appropriations for this fiscal year. So I think the challenge for not only this committee, but the council and management, of course, you have this fledgling parks department. You've bought a lot of land. You have levels of general obligation debt that you have to pay back, even though some of the funding may be overlapping from 3 or 4 or even 5 different sources. But ultimately, in the end, the 2 other true special tax districts, I think it's Bethel, Lake Wiley, and Field Day. Yeah, those are overlapping up in that area of the county. So what we have to try to do is figure out what kind of level of service that we want to provide going into the future, letting your master plan be the immediate placeholder. In a growing community, do know that the Parks Master Plan, just like your comprehensive plans and transportation plans, need to really be updated and tweaked about every 5 years, because you are a growing community and not only the raw population demands drive things, but there are differences in preferences of level of service by generation. Now, I haven't tried pickleball yet. I used to be able to play tennis a little bit, and if I can't get off of a ladder right over the weekend with a paintbrush, I'm not even going to try to play tennis right now. But pickleball might be an option, even though I don't have my head around it yet. But even children, youth sports, esports is apparently a big thing now. So we have to think about not only what kind of level of service we want to provide, whether it's the more passive or active programming we've been doing that's more outdoors like, but if we want to progress to a level eventually where we're getting real programming to people, whether it's youth, adults, or seniors, we still have to think that through. But the bottom line is that you need funding. And we've got to figure out how we're going to rebalance, reform, revitalize the funding issue that's going to go on a pathway consistent with the growth of the community and the demand for parks and recreation services. And I think, maybe the recreation tax, as I read the recreation tax, the intent is to provide services. It wasn't so specific in saying you got to have a park here or a park there, but it did qualify in saying that it should primarily be for the benefit of the unincorporated citizens, right? So you have to do that, and then when it was amended in 2022, and I think perhaps that's when it was established that you came into these municipal allocations. And then, of course, there's reporting requirements and different dictums that are in the ordinance. But we may have to rethink eventually, these taxes and the others, because, I came from a place where it was very cut and dry. Operationally, we funded whatever we didn't get out of fees from the general fund. And then we primarily used capital through one of a series of sales tax, kind of like pennies, but that's for roads. But we definitely had $2-3 million a year that we could put back into facilities or capital maintenance or equipment. So I think the challenge is going to be, where do we go from here?
Yeah, and I think tying it back to the thanks, Tom, to the Parks Master Plan, the consultant, for that very reason, recommended moving away from this. They also recommended establishing a millage for parks as well. And so those two recommendations make a lot of sense when you think about, we've got a lot of land that isn't open right now. We also have parks that all residents of the county utilize. So think about Ebenezer, think about the Catawba Bend at some point. We're not in the business where we're not providing parks to all county residents. So if all county residents are using the parks, why are only unincorporated residents paying this millage? I think that's the balance. So if council's vision is to create premier parks for the entire county, then we shouldn't just be taxing our unincorporated residents. And I think that's the piece here. In Georgia, we use a plan with the municipalities to come up with who does what. So if you all want to do passive recreation, then let's do passive recreation for the entire county, and let's let the municipalities do more active recreation. And that can all work together. And we can talk more about those options. But in general, what we're doing is we're bringing these recommendations from the consultant study to y'all, and we're happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Just a point of clarification. So the rec tax that's being collected right now is collected from the unincorporated residents to compensate the municipalities for the students that are in the unincorporated area to use the services of the incorporated area.
Yep, that's the idea of it. Right. And I think the opportunity is to say, look, we understand that parks programs fees never pay for the entire service. I've worked in municipalities, I've worked with parks departments, I understand that. So there could be a place where municipalities decide to charge their unincorporated residents more. What we see in parks is the movement towards leagues that aren't run by the city.
Right.
And so those leagues are renting the fields from the municipalities. And they're charging all their soccer players and other players the same rate, depending on where they live. We see a lot of folks from Charlotte come down to field day to play soccer there. So I think we have to think regionally in a lot of things. And I think if a municipality decides to charge more, one of the recommendations the consultant said was we'll create a fund, a scholarship fund, for those who might need it. But I think, when you think about the amount of money and the political process and the divisiveness this tax creates, I think the opportunity is to unify folks and say, we want to support municipalities. If that means supporting municipalities on capital projects that benefit unincorporated and municipal residents, I'd much rather do that on the capital side and build parks for folks, instead of paying for fees that I can't substantiate that we're getting our money's worth on this investment, because I don't think we are.
Right, I was just clarifying the point of collecting the fee and what it was used for. And then the second thing I just want to mention very quickly is, and I'm not disagreeing with what you said, but you mentioned active and passive. So the county is actually in active and passive. We're in active and passive. We're in active in Lake Wiley. We're passive everywhere else for the most part. But when you look into the future of the unincorporated area of the county, I think you'll find maybe we're going to end up in active and passive recreation. So it's not real cut and dry.
And that's very possible, but I think what we have to do right now is, for purposes of tax and taxpayer equity, two standards that we're accustomed to is, are we duplicating service? Are we double taxing? Maybe to some degree internally, but I don't believe that we're duplicating or double taxing with the municipalities, because they have a different service model. And this goes back to an economic theory of what they call the free rider problem. Anytime you have an open park, that where there's access to the general public, it doesn't know boundaries. It's city residents are available to use the county parks like Danny Mountain and vice versa. I'm a Rock Hill resident. I went for a walk up on Danny Mountain. I didn't put a dime in the bucket, but just because I lived in Rock Hill. But I think the important thing is that no matter, you've got to go back to what I said earlier. You've got to decide what kind of service and what level of service you want, and figure out the passive active mix.
Well, the first thing that I would like to address is this funding allocation. I've read through the paperwork before. It doesn't seem extremely detailed. It's not a well thought out allocation. As you can look at that, you can't tell me that Hickory Grove, McConnell's, Sharon, and Smyrna have the exact same number of people coming to it. And you can't say that Fort Mill and TK had the exact same number of kids coming to it to use it. So looking through this, I really want to, because we now have a Parks and Rec department, it would be my opinion to use this funding to fix our department and fund our parks, and do away with this altogether, going to the municipalities. That would be my number one. Second one for y'all to think about. These are just the two ideas I came up with. The other one is to do a reimbursement to make sure that we are paying for what we're paying for. So every quarter, which would be after the seasons, each municipality would send us an invoice for the number of county kids or whatever were actually in their program. And then we would write a flat rate per kid check to them. So whether that's $20 a kid or $50 a kid, whatever the difference in what is considered funding, what they tax for around there. So those are my two. Now, if y'all have a better idea,
We've gone round and
I
round.
know you have. I've watched all the meetings. I've read the reports, and
Well, the leagues, the travel leagues, are very costly for the parents, but they're paying that to come, let's say, to TDK, a travel league. So how would you reimburse? I mean,
Leagues
it'd
wouldn't
the
be, if
same.
it's not a TUK run program,
Mhm.
then they don't get any reimbursement whatsoever.
Okay.
I hate to say it because it's my area, but the Lake Wiley Athletic Association getting money back, it's not really in there also. Now, we use the funds for our parks, and I'm not saying that, let's say, as y'all mentioned, that we need to assist on some projects that the municipalities have for betterment. Let's say we do have a partnership with them, because there's no sense in us building baseball fields over in Fort Mill if Fort Mill already has baseball fields. I mean, we're not competing with them. We want to be a partner. So if they're building baseball fields, need to build more baseball fields because the county's growing, then maybe we can help out on, you know, some projects like that. But just dumping arbitrary numbers of money into different places, I'm not in agreement with that.
Yeah, I think the discrepancy with this was that you had, and we've got people here in the audience that can explain this if we want them to, but you use the school head count for each one of these areas, and Fort Mill and TKK, they agreed to split it.
Yeah.
And then this past year, Lake Wiley and Clover agreed to, the mayor of Clover and one of the representatives from Lake Wiley agreed to this, so we found money elsewhere to the other ones that are the same, the four that are the same. That was, I'm pretty sure that was council that came up with those.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns as being new is that we didn't have somebody from York County in that decision-making process. And so I think the opportunity as a leader in this is for us to establish, based on what council wants to do, what council thinks they should do with the parks. And then we think about funding that. I think when you think about the number of conversations and the amount of time we worked on this as part of the budget process versus other things, that's where I would say that this is broken. And there's an opportunity to make sure we're not consistently spending a lot of time on this, but y'all can speak more to the vision of parks in the future for York County. I'm happy to meet with any municipality. I've been doing it the last few weeks, talking about collaboration, things that they want us to work on with them. But I think paying registration fees for individuals is not something that is a county service right now. So why are we affording that?
Yep.
I think if we get into the active recreation, conceivably, then we do that. But right now, I think more than anything, we need to think about how y'all want to run the parks that we have. And we just funded 11 new positions for Ebenezer, for Allison Creek, and for our Parks Department. And those are services that any county resident can benefit from.
So I think one question we have to think about, you've got the options in the, I just got this a couple hours ago and read through it quickly in between meetings, but something I think we have to think about is that we're sitting basically on February 1st, and we've got to vet this out, and I think the three of us would agree that we need to come up with some option that makes sense, because council's argued about this allocation every year I've been on council. So we do need to come up with something. My concern, though, is that this is February. We're not going to solve this tonight. So we're going to have another meeting in February. And we're going to have to take it to council in February, March. And the council's going to deliberate it. Maybe 2 meetings. We're going to be in April, May. And that's a lot of money for the Parks and Rec departments around the county to have to find in their budgets. So I'm not saying this is what we should do, but obviously something to consider is what are we doing this year, and then plan for July of 2026, what we're going to do in January 2026. I'm a little sensitive to, everybody else is working on the budgets right now as well, and to find these monies to make up for what's lost, that's not an easy task.
Well, that's why I wanted this ahead of time, and I did think about it a lot more, and I would would recommend to the municipalities to go ahead and plan like this doesn't exist.
Oh, sure. Well,
And go on and if they get this money, when it's all said and done, then they can reallocate their budgets how they feel needed, but, so that they aren't tied up until a final answer in.
Well, I would think by July of 2025, we'll know exactly what we're gonna do, so they have a year to plan for
But
their
I'm
own
saying,
budgets.
do it now, if we're gonna do it. And get it over with and move on, because what's gonna happen is next year, we're gonna kick it again, and it happens
Well,
every.
see, I'm not suggesting we kick it, I'm suggesting we come up with a solution
Right.
for July 2026, but, you know, this is a council decision.
Right.
And I think we have to zero in on what we're thinking about, and then that would help us decide what makes sense. I mean, are we cutting the municipalities off completely? So Lake Wiley's not getting 4 of the 3?
What do you
And
think?
by the way, you mentioned something about, and I think you're referring to
I'm
Lake Wiley not
anticipating my
being.
phone calls.
Oh, I know they're coming.
So-
You had mentioned Lake Wiley not being represented. I would suggest that Catherine represent Lake Wiley because that's the county. And that's probably what should have happened in the past. Is
I
that-
just think the county in general should be represented.
Well, but what I'm saying is the county should represent Lake Wiley because that's the only unincorporated area in that list there. Everybody else on the list represents the municipality. is
Yeah,
what I'm
so,
saying.
so I think part of the challenge is, you know, look, when we think about Lake Wiley, we think of that as a York County park, okay? So we're collecting a tax, we're distributing it, and the Lake Wiley portion is funding the gap in field day. There's millage available in that tax district to afford that. So in theory, what we're doing is we're adding a third tax to an area of the county, and then giving it back, a
Don't
portion of it
disagree.
back.
Yeah.
And so I think the opportunity is to say, let's reduce one of those taxes, and instead you have 2 taxes instead of 3. And I think that's the opportunity, and that's why, to the consultant, this just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a layer of confusion for $1.6 million.
And most programs I've been in this, you know, I was in some Rock Hill programs for different things, and I paid more as a county resident for those. I paid, I don't know what it was, $15 more per person to be in it.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's not like it's out of the ordinary, it's a very common.
I agree.
You want to go to the next so we can see what the recommendations are? I can pull it up on my.
So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to our park director. Well, but y'all can go back if you want, Chair.
Because I feel like this is kind of a separate item from the parks itself.
Mhm.
Like to,
Well,
would you, what are your ideas?
as a recommendation, this committee, because this is so politically charged, that's just a tiny word there for what it really is. I think that this is something that the entire council needs to talk about.
Okay.
What do you think, Watts?
I was just going back to read through what was sent to us, because I was looking at page, the reason I said maybe move forward to get to this section is page 6. Because when I read through this very quickly.
Of the recommendation?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to continue the conversation, but
Yeah, he recommended to
Do away.
do away with it.
And I think in general, in terms of the full council weighing in on this, that's what the budget process can do. What I want to make sure is when I make my recommended budget, that it's representative of the recommendation of this committee. All right, so there's things y'all need to work through. At the same time, we're going to have hopefully some time in a retreat to talk about CIP projects with y'all as a full council, and we can always double back on what y'all's recommendation is on this then. But I don't think putting this on, you know, I think y'all need to develop your recommendation first before taking it to the full council. I wouldn't
Agree.
skip y'all's recommendation to get the
Yeah.
whole council weigh. They'll weigh in once y'all make your
Oh, yeah.
recommendation.
we'll talk
And then-
about a countywide tax right quick then, because that's one of the options.
Yep.
Okay, what'd you say, Watts? I'm sorry.
Discuss a countywide tax.
So expand this to countywide.
Unincorporated and
Yeah.
incorporated, is that what we're saying? Is that what we're
Yep.
saying? Incorporated
That's an
and
option. So
unincorporated?
that's an option. So I think if
Will
you
you walk
think
us through
about,
that?
I think if you think about equity, you think about who's using our parks, what you first need to determine is how expensive is it to provide the level of service that our parks directors want to provide in our parks.
Mhm.
So you all have committed, and we're gonna get to that in the rest of the presentation, funding to help us catch up on the current things we need help with. And that was that 1.2 million that y'all approved for this year. There's some other recommendations that we're gonna talk about that we didn't have funding to achieve that are also on the audit. So that's just our current. And so I think what we want you to think about is first, what's the total cost once we know what y'all wanna do with the available land? Maybe we only give minimum access to the 3 parcels of land that there's currently not access to. But we can't tell you how much that's gonna cost until we get an idea of your vision for activating these spaces. So if we were to go countywide, the question would be, would you need 1.5 mils countywide, or would you need a little bit less? Because, thinking about it this way, it's about 1.9 million per mil countywide. So it'd be more like 3 million if this was a countywide tax. Do we need 3 million? Well, we need to know what the level of service is first, and then we could. But yes, we need at least 1.5. I can tell you that. Long way to answer a simple question. So sorry.
So 1.9 mils countywide. Well, I mean, 1.9 million a mil countywide. And so if we collected a countywide tax, we need a tax to help fund our needs for our parks. But are we saying that are we gonna give any monies back to municipalities in that countywide tax?
That's up to y'all. That's not what we didn't bring a recommendation. Our recommendation is we need to be able to fund our own parks before we fund other municipalities' operations. That's our recommendation.
I think if we can gauge your preference and the whole council's preference, I think we can, zero in on the dollars and the mills and, how to help the municipalities and the like.
I mean, I feel like we need a countywide tax, but I'm also interested in how we transition from this, which I didn't agree with. I mean, I agreed with how they're doing it, but when it got to council, it got political. I never agreed with that, made that clear. But I'm sensitive to how we transition away from this, if we transition away from this. But I think a countywide tax makes sense. We have Catawba Bend. We could have something in the middle of the county one day, and you got Worth Mountain at some point, 15, 20 years from now, whatever.
Right.
And a lot of parks in between that we don't even know that we're gonna have, including what you have over in Lake Wiley. So, to me, I believe we do need a countywide tax. As soon as water and sewer spreads across the county, we're gonna have all these amenities all over the county.
And that was the recommendation of the consultant.
And if I may, Watts, I would also say in the spirit of the existing ordinance that, if the council can't establish the priorities on what to do with the funding model before the end of the fiscal year, that almost defaults, I think, to collecting the unincorporated tax for the next fiscal year. But regardless of what we do, countywide or unincorporated, the ordinance is very clear that they call it area representative, but it's really municipalities. Each designated area representative shall make a revenue needs request to the county council for the upcoming fiscal year. And at the close of an existing fiscal year, they're supposed to file a report for what they did with the preceding year's funds. So, if we continue to go in that direction, I don't know what's happened in the past, but for the sake of structure and justification, maybe we should be getting written proposals.
And that's what I would lean towards, is having them submit to us for what their projects are gonna be,
Yes.
or what their use is gonna be, and then we offer them the money. I mean, this is kind of the only one that's like this, that we don't get information ahead of time. When everybody else comes and asks for money, they have a plan.
You're speaking about the municipalities in the county, when you say them, right?
Yes, or any other project,
Well, they've come and presented. It's just when it hits council and not to, there's one area of the county that contested anything that was brought forward. And then once that happened, then a few other people would contest what they're getting, and that's where the formula fell out of the window.
And this was all based on the time when when we gave up Parks and Rec department. I don't know when that actually happened. I know back in the 80s and 90s, there was maybe parks.
Yeah. So, not making a recommendation, but what makes sense to me, and it made sense to me 2 years ago, but we didn't do it, and that was a countywide tax. So incorporated, unincorporated countywide tax. I'm sensitive to the impact to the municipalities if we do away with this money for this year. I am sensitive to that. And then the last piece is, I almost feel like a recommendation, me personally, to F&O is to begin looking at adequate public facilities, start building that out, and a piece of that should be for parks as well. So when a developer comes in and develops an area, we're gonna have to have a park one day in an area for 5 years, 10 years. We start filling these buckets now from them as well. So I'd like to not that it could happen, but I'm ready for that to rise up, and let's begin discussing that as well.
I think it was a recommendation of the consultant, but,
It was.
so I think at this point, that's still in y'all's purview.
Yeah, it doesn't-
Oh, let's stay here for adequate public
I
facilities?
mean, I think he brought it up in the master plan.
Oh, okay.
Something
Yeah.
you want to talk about, something
This
before.
is just a side note, it would really be impact fees still.
It's both, actually, because they're two different things, yeah. But maybe we need an education on the
Maybe.
difference between the two.
But I would think it's even bigger than that because it's not just parks, it's everything.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah, so
right.
we would need to
It's
apply.
roads,
Yeah,
it's
so
urban
it's,
gutter, it's sidewalks,
Yeah, it's a
anything you can
huge-
think
And if
about.
you're thinking more holistically, then that's something
I
in the
am.
strategic plan and the planning goal. I think that's
Yeah.
where you'd want to talk with council members about sending that to the
Right.
applicable committee. I don't even know if it would be F&O at that point.
And I think if she's ready, I think Catherine's presentation will add color to
Okay.
what you're talking about and thinking about.
Okay.
And I know we would want to be conscientious of time too.
But anyway, countywide tax is what I think makes sense, but again, I'm very sensitive to
Right.
the municipalities.
Yeah.
All right, with that, Catherine's going to walk us through the rest of the recommendations.
So before we dive into the rest of the recommendations, I just wanted to pop a map up here of our county parks, just to orient everybody again of where the county parks are. We have 10 park properties, 2 of which are leased by Duke Energy. 2 we have agreements with different entities. And about only half of them are actually open to the public. So there's still half that need to be developed, or we need to come up with plans for minimum access to just get them activated and so the public can start using them. And then, you know, I've got the map over here to the left just to kind of indicate the Bethel Lake Wiley Park District and show those parcels there. So, and I think Josh kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but we wanted to bring to you, and I think this was some of what the consultant talked about too, is there's immediate needs that need to be addressed with current operations, which we've already started that, thanks to you guys on the approving of the $1.2 million in positions and some capital items there to get us better in the direction where we need to be operation-wise. The second phase is to start talking about capital plans on current land. How we're gonna fund those, what's the operating cost associated with those, how are we gonna fund that? And then the third phase is talking about future land, where do we see future parks going across the county?
And I think in terms of thinking about the CIP and why I think it's so important that y'all speak into our CIP as council is, think about the next 5 years. How do we want to activate the empty land we have right now? That's right in front of us. And then think about that 5 to 10 year or 6 to 10 year time frame in terms of what are the types of parks and locations of parks that we might want to consider into the future. We can't give y'all good feedback in terms of our funding capacity in our capital fund if we don't get a sense on y'all's vision on timing. Catawba Bend, when would you want to do phase 2? Well, we need to set aside a lot of money to do that. And so there's opportunities for us to utilize the funding we have into the future, but we have to have a sense of when y'all think that might make sense.
So 1.2 million is what we approved in this upcoming budget. So what are you short? For immediate needs, what is the dollar value?
She's good, come slide, how's that?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, so we're gonna follow these kind of three phases as we move forward with the presentation. So we're gonna talk about kind of current, immediate needs, then we'll move to current land, and then future. So these were just some of the administrative operational recommendations. This is kind of where the consultant started, with the overall recommendations, that was presented to you guys back in November. And you can see down across the bottom there, you know, it talks about rethinking our budget model, revisiting the recreation districts, the special districts. There's also a recommendation on growing the operational budget to 8.75, so.
From what currently, the 8.75?
I don't have that exact number in front of me right now.
I mean, is it 5, 6, 7?
6, probably the, 6
And that
million.
includes the 1.2 or no?
No, that's a portion of this. That was getting us towards the 875, so.
Yeah, so
I
we're
think-
about 2.75
Which-
million away from hitting your mark.
Which is why
And
thinking
that-
about the rec tax is so important, because we're not that far away when you think.
But that's just for current
Yeah.
parks that are open, like that's just to
Current.
get us where we need to be. That's not
Okay.
taking into account building out Bethel and opening it, building out Catawba
That's
Bend.
additional. Yep.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, he talked and touched on maintaining the cost recovery rate. There's the next two are the pieces that Josh has already touched on about considering a dedicated millage, and then the recommendation, on dissolving the current unincorporated rec tax. And then the last one is to consider, different policies like the impact fees, land development agreements, things of that nature to maybe help with, you know, future
Mhm.
parks, future land.
Back up 1 second.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
I don't.
Just help explain the third, grow general revenue, maintaining 35% of 2.6, 3.062 million cost recovery rate. Somebody
So-
explain that a little.
So right now, our cost recovery rate is, if I'm not mistaken, it's in that 30 to 35%. So we're doing well. So, you know, essentially, we want our fees, our user fees to help offset the cost
Right.
of
Yeah.
our
And
operating.
it varies per property.
Correct, there's
But the
some that
average.
do, yes, and it's all based on what you have at the park, what
Mhm.
you offer,
Exactly.
things of that nature.
That's a good ratio to maintain.
I think it's above the national average is also what the consultant indicated.
But I think with what we do, it's very attainable.
Mm-hmm.
So once Catawba Bend opens, where do we see this shift in this 30, 35? Where does it shift to? What's it shift up to? Could it be 50, 55, 60, if we know projections?
Well, I think you gotta think about the phases, and we'd have to do research, I would say, let's look at that, because in terms of the revenue, you know, if we don't have camping out there,
Correct.
we're not gonna bring in a lot of revenue, and that's phase 2 and 3, so,
It's all gonna depend on what you go to build out there.
yeah.
I mean, the Whitewater Center has no camping, and we pay, I think, $50 a year to be a member. It's not, man, that's probably a lot of money for us. It wouldn't be that much.
But they have a lot of activities
Yeah.
to do.
Right.
There's really,
But I'm
I mean,
not sure what the first phase of our
until it
project is.
opens, I mean, are we even gonna charge a fee? There's not a whole lot out
Right.
there.
Right,
Probably not.
Okay.
but we can certainly, you know, dive into that and look at some projections based on what we go to build.
Okay, on the rec tax,
Mm-hmm.
it was mentioned, but I'd like to, us to not forget that if we take that away, we wanna work in that scholarship fund for
Mhm.
qualified youth. So let's don't forget that.
Okay, any other comments or questions kind of before we move on? So still with, you know, the current needs, and this is where the consultant dove into personnel, which again, you know, we made some strides with that with this recent $1.2 million approval. And just to kind of give you guys, you know, an update, I mean, of the first bullet, 2 of those 6 positions were funded in this 1.2. Allison Creek got 2 of the 2 positions that were recommended. Ebenezer Park got 2 of the 2 positions that were recommended. Catawba Bend, we got 3 positions, We're still gonna be requesting additional positions with FY '26 because we anticipate to open in the fall. And then we also, down at the bottom, where it said consider insourcing maintenance for Allison Creek, you also funded positions and capital-related items for us to begin insourcing maintenance for those two parks, and we will not have any outside contracts for maintenance in any of our parks. So we made a huge stride in these, but as you see, the third and fourth and fifth bullet point, you know, once you build out Bethel Lake Wiley or any other properties, obviously there's more personnel that will need to be funded, and then part-time employees too. And you're gonna see this in the budget request that come before you in FY '26, that, well, management will, I guess, but we have to utilize part-time employees to offset the hours. You know, we're not 8 to 5, we're not Monday through Friday. Our parks are open on holidays. If we're fee-based and we require a fee, then we've got to staff it. So just kind of be mindful of that too. But we made a huge stride with this recommendation.
Catherine, real quickly, what's the
Yes.
dollar value of staff positions you need in the 25-26 budget?
I think we're too early, and we haven't even had a chance as the manager's office to review those.
Okay?
So I'd rather let the manager's office work on that budget, have that conversation as part of the budget process.
Right, but we're being asked to come up with a recommendation on a rec tax countywide, and these things, in my mind, fall into it.
So my recommendation is we go first park by park, and you tell us what you want to do at that park, and we tell you how much it would be at that park.
I think we need input from Catherine really to know what she wants to do at these parks.
I think you're jumping ahead of the slides,
Right.
is what I would encourage you.
Yeah.
Well, the 1.2 that we've already allocated, and that you said the different personnel. So, we're gonna be adding more, you're saying, in the budget.
We know that we're gonna need more positions next year, because Catawba Bend opens in October. And so I think one of the things that I'm gonna encourage y'all as council to do when we fund capital projects, we have to be more realistic about the operating expenses. And I
Yes.
don't think that was done here.
Yeah.
I can't speak, you know,
I totally
conclusively,
agree.
but we've got a lot of land, and
Yeah.
we're operations poor. And
Exactly.
so we've got to fix that. That's one of our problems, and so
Yeah.
we're trying to fix that. I think what we need to understand is, when would y'all want us to open the Bethel Lake Wiley Parks? Or is it just a gradual access? Like, that's a moving piece, because at that point, we can tell you about operating impacts. I can't tell you operating impacts except for Catawba Bend right now, because we're gonna have access, and we're gonna need 4 or 5 more positions and a bunch of part-time. So I think what you can use, though, is that consultant's estimate of the total amount. What he gave y'all was to operate our current parks. And so that didn't include Bethel Lake Wiley, though. And so that's part of the problem. You got a cap in Bethel Lake Wiley of 500,000 plus inflation for operating. We're pretty close to that. And so I think that's all part of this. And so what I want you to think about is really, you know, so you got that number from the consultant. You're at about 6.7 for an annual budget for parks. And so that's what you need to think about. We're short about probably, I don't know, another $1.5 million or so. But we can get you that exact number for the next meeting. I don't think we need to go through.
So
budget
how many
requests.
employees did we get off the 1.2?
11 full-time and 2 part-time.
Okay. I think it would be helpful that if the whole council could see what was, you know, what staff was added out of that 1.2.
Yes, it was all attached to the agenda item in the agenda, so
Okay.
you all had it.
Okay.
Yep, y'all voted on that.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? So just a couple other items, you know, that the consultant recommended was talking about branding, potentially having a dedicated position to help with public relations, marketing, and things of that nature. Also, there was a recommendation for creating a commission or a Parks and Recreation board that would be countywide, and or a Parks Foundation. And I know that there had been some conversations of a Parks Foundation previously. I was sharing that with Josh right when I started. It was more specific for Catawba Bend, but I think there's some benefits potentially to having one countywide. Now on to just current park recommendations, and I've just got these highlighted here because this is what focuses on the current, and this is kind of where, you know, Josh has already mentioned, you know, we need your guys' input on where do you want us to go, how are we gonna fund, you know, Catawba Bend, what is our next phase, how do we incorporate trails? We saw in the survey that trails was a number one, or at least in the top 5. You know, as an amenity. And then also the next thing is to decide what we're gonna do about the Bethel Lake Wiley properties. How quick do we want those open? Do we want minimum access? Do we want full build out? Et cetera. But I think a lot of our moving parts going forward are based on the direction of these items.
This is probably in the bright spot in all these things that we are getting close on time. Something for you to think about, I've thought about it for the last 3 years, which is these Bethel Lake Wiley parks. I would propose that we sell off Thistle and the goat farm. We are out of money in that district. There's not enough capital in there to do anything with it. There's not enough operating costs to run 3 parks and do anything with them. That's why they're sitting vacant at this point. So what I wanted to propose for y'all to think about, we can make changes to it, but sell those off, use that money to refund the bond, or to pay off the bond. Then what we would move into, we get that thing paid back down, because the recommendation from the consultant was to do away with these special tax districts, since we have Parks Department again, and have one thing, one tax rate covering all of it, and have one committee covering all the parks. Not all these separate committees, all fighting over different things, not being uniform across the whole entire county. Because we, again, just because there's a park right outside the Bethel Lake Wiley Park District, we don't need the exact same things in both of them, because one's for one thing and one's for another, or because everybody wants it, this, you know, those things there.
Chairman Linton, if I may chime in on that, while that's indeed a very worthy idea, we've had discussions, and these are general obligation bonds that are servicing the debt, and I think there would be a good measure of risk if we were to try to sell the land and use it to pay off the debt. Chances are the land would probably be much more valuable than when we bought it, so that could be considered a form of backdoor arbitrage, if you will. And I don't know that the IRS and our bond rating agencies or financial advisors would look favorably on that. We may want to get some good stricture from either the CFO, treasurer, and or the county attorney or bond counsel, but I have a good degree of confidence in saying that as worthy as the idea is, I think it presents some financial risk.
But we're happy to, since the county attorney's not here, we'll engage the county attorney and work on a memo.
At least one of them is less, worth less than what we paid for it, because we put conservation easement on it. One of them we paid, in my opinion, way over market value on.
Yes, sir.
So
I
don't think we're gonna,
my spider sense is tingled, so my intuition.
There's IRS implications, but that
Right.
doesn't mean we can't explore the question and get y'all feedback for the next meeting, and I think we can have the county
Well,
attorney.
let me just put it this way, I don't want to be stuck with a ball and chain, and so if there are tax implications, we'll just have to, in my opinion, deal with those rather than having something sitting out there vacant that's falling apart, just abandoned, that is a sore spot for a bunch of county residents. They're gonna be more angry about that, in my opinion. And so what we would do is convert everything and focus on Wood End for that part.
Well, we'll get clear guidance on it.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on it. I know nothing about the parks over in Lake Wiley. Unfortunately, I have to lean on
So
staff.
where did this come from?
So
Just asking.
I provided you guys with copies of each of the master plans, for the 3 Bethel Lake Wiley properties,
Okay.
Catawba Bend, and Worth Mountain.
Those
Okay.
are what y'all voted on
Which,
last year.
truthfully, we can move on to the next slide, because that
Well-
kind of ties into the conversation unless you.
Yeah, and real quick, a recommendation for the committee, if you haven't been to the land here, I would work with Catherine to schedule a time
Happy
for a
to.
visit. Debbie Watts. and the other
Which property is
people.
one that has no access points?
Yeah, you got your hand.
Thistle.
This
Okay.
one.
There's, yeah, so I think
Okay.
in each of these, you could access it if you wanted to, right?
Right.
The question is it worth the cost?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the main question. Are these things worth the cost? But I'll think about that. But please find time before the next meeting to visit the properties. That would be valuable.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to
Well,
meet
I
you
mean,
somewhere
if
and
you
take
look
you out.
at, and now my notes are all messed up. But I have them all nice and in order, but if you look at what he recommended, or not what he recommended, but what the survey, what happened with the survey, Tom and I were talking a little bit about that today. And you've got, neighborhood parks are the number one thing that they want. And the most people that weighed in on the survey, a great portion of the people were Lake Wiley people.
Now-
Interesting.
Now, these results, if you go back and look at the report, they only took the scientifically valid survey results because there weren't enough that they felt were online. So they
how
utilized,
many?
they utilized the scientifically valid.
Because
if
it
you go
said
back-
500 and.
Correct, and it's broken out by, like municipality, unincorporated area, as to who completed those.
And as we discussed, that would give me greater comfort if they relied on random samples and
Mhm.
surveying.
Right. So, he had recommended, somewhere in here, events, or that we should have,
Yeah.
besides the neighborhood parks.
And I think that
Yeah.
speaks to where we're going on this slide here. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna have events, you gotta have access. And so I think that's where,
I just know
Catherine's.
that, I have not actually attended one, but the Goat Park, I think, does have, events and things, so that's just my 2 cents.
So we would rotate those over to the Woodian property.
Mhm,
Right. So, going back to, the previous slide and just talking about recommendations on current parks and where we wanna go, just kinda wanted to create like options, on the 5 properties right now that, we're obviously moving forward with Catawba Bend, it's under phase 1. I did just wanna indicate what we have kinda spent to date, which is including the construction, right now for Catawba Bend. I've got in phase 2 items there that were grants that were received, so we're already kind of in those. And then all the other ones under those are options. Constructing the Greenway Trail, construction of dam repair, things of that nature for us to consider.
And working to the 5-year CIP.
Correct. Then also, up at the top, you've got the Bethel Lake Wiley properties, Thistle, Goat Farm, and Woodian. Those are minimum access capital costs that we put together. Engineering also, is involved in that as well. And that's just to get access. That's bare bones, bare minimum, parking areas, trails, just to activate and get people, on the property. If that's, something that we wanna look into doing. And then Worth Mountain, just wanted to kinda highlight that we are activating Worth Mountain right now. We received the $750,000 state earmark funds to add trails there. We're still gonna maintain the WMA agreement with DNR, so we're only pulling about 250 acres out of the WMA agreement for these trails. But I included the master plan of Worth Mountain here, again, for consideration and for you guys to think about, what do we wanna do next there? How does that build into the CIP, and then, again, as we make decisions on how we wanna phase the development of these properties, I then need to go back and determine the operating costs associated with, what we go and build out.
Right.
So until we know really this, we can't dictate operating costs.
How many miles of trails at Worth Mountain?
Worth Mountain, I mean, we're hoping to get 4 miles is I think what we wrote in the grant, and then we also have to do a parking area.
So it's gonna be hiking, not really biking.
Correct, it'll actually be shared use equestrian hiking. Cause that was the specific state earmark.
For the
and
hunting, you'll have designated areas then.
Yes,
for
ma'am.
the trails. and-
So we've already worked with DNR, to, modify that map. And we've already, again, met with them, and we've already had GIS, pull those coordinates and pull about 250 acres out, of the WMA
Any
property.
idea how many people use that?
Well, there's more we could do out there, so that's part of the question to y'all. I mean, the usage
it's
will
a
be
dis-
dependent
it's a
on
hike
the,
out
on the
there.
level of service, but I think it's
I mean,
important to have
I'm not
parks
hiking
everywhere.
like Watts is, but
Yeah, but when we talk with,
Right.
with folks in western York County, this is the park we talk about that's close to them. And I think what we're trying to do is think about the county as a whole. So we've
Yep.
got Catawba on the one side, we've got Worth Mountain on the other side that really features our other river. And so we think of our natural assets and giving everybody access to all those assets. And just like Ebenezer is one of the only beaches you can get to publicly on the lake. So that's how we think about it, and I think that's important. I think if you all want to ask us questions in terms of, well, what would it cost to build out Woodend, that's something that staff can go and get. What's the operating impact of that? That's something staff can go and get in time for the next meeting, and we can have that further discussion, just so you have the parameters. We've got, what, a little less than 3 million left in Bethel Lake Wiley for,
Right around
for
3 million.
construction and acquisition, and that's the cap. So we've tried to show just in general what you could do to get access, because we hear a lot from the community up there that you want to get on these parks, whether it's 1 or 3 of them. There's a variety of things we can do. If it's Woodend, what would a parking lot cost? What would electrical cost there? So we can get as specific as y'all want. You just have to give us feedback so we can bring back information to the next meeting.
Realistically, what do you envision it would in a phase 1, 2, 3, or what does it look like?
I mean, typically, the funding's not there to build it out.
Right. So
I
it'd be
mean,
phased.
Right,
No,
so,
at this time, there is no funding to build it.
That's right.
Once
That's
you have
right.
one phase built, that's it. There's no more funding.
Right, but how many phases would you think it would be? I know you got to figure out how much it's gonna cost, what you need to do, and where you're gonna get the money.
Well, it would require county contribution outside of the tax district.
That's right. So,
I mean, I think there's a lot of questions too. I mean, you've got structures on the property that we haven't, there hasn't been decisions made on whether we're keeping, renovating. All those things play into the cost.
Yeah, and so I'll harken back to the animal shelter conversation. I think, this is the danger of giving estimates so early.
yeah,
To Catherine's point, she's saying it very nicely, if we don't keep the house, it's a lot more affordable. And if we don't build some multi-use center on Woodend, it's a lot more affordable. So we would love to show you the pieces, but think about how expensive that animal shelter quote was. So if you think about building out a big park, it's a lot of land, and doing it right, you're pushing, 30 million probably.
right.
To build
So
that
$30
park
million
right there would be
like
18 to $20 million.
Yeah, so nationally though, there's probably some data that shows when you have something like this that you're gonna build out, that you start with these things first, and then you go to the next phase, and you finish it out with buildings and.
Sure. In Catawba Bend, we're doing that approach, and so I think
The problem Vineyard doing that.
the opportunity is for y'all to say, hey, for phase 1, we'd love to see this access, this parking lot, trails. And then for phase 2, we'd love to see more. But I think for us, there's 3 million before the county has to contribute beyond the tax district.
Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity to use that 3 million for that one piece, right, to do the parking lot, and Catherine can run the numbers. So you can also do that. You can use the current funding that's left to give access to one of these parks. And what Catherine quoted was very rudimentary access. I don't think that 1.2 included You know, that was the
Well,
road probably.
Thistle that was a lot of the road, but like Goat Farm and Wood End, again, I mean, it's very minimal, it's trails, I mean, parking lot, it is just getting people onto these properties to be able to recreate however they want and then utilize trails. And similar to like Catawba Bend, I mean, there was direction on, hey, we wanna get it open, we wanna get people on the property. So then we started working from there on, okay, well, we gotta have a road in, we gotta have a gate, we gotta have, you know, we want bathrooms, we want trails. So then that's where we're able to develop those costs and things of that nature, and work off of the plan here. But if the goal is just to get access, then that's, you know, that's what we work towards.
Yeah, and so one of the challenges of Wood End is the current 557 project.
Mm-hmm.
But if y'all are, as a committee, want to see information in terms of, well, what if we use the rest of Bethel Lake Wiley's construction funding and acquisition funding and put that into Wood End, what could we get with that amount of money? Maybe that's something we bring to the next meeting, so y'all have a better sense of.
Well, and then to offset the IRS implications, could we sell the properties and still use, instead of paying back the bond, use the money to do construction on Wood End instead?
That may be dependent on how the bond is written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the attorney will be able to speak into all
Yeah.
that.
So, the Thistle property, I had looked into this one before because of the lack of accessibility. I for
I
one,
don't have
You could.
to leave till 6:30.
I for one, I could agree tonight that we probably ought to look at selling Thistle. The goat farm is being used currently, so but I haven't been over there either. Debbie, you said you had not been over there.
Well, here's the goat farm, here's the little thing for it. It is only set up for a farmer's market.
Mhm.
That is done once a month, maybe.
And you
It's
move
just
that-
once a month.
and you move that to Wood End.
I would move it to Wood End,
Mhm.
which is only 2 or 3 miles down the road.
Logically, it makes sense.
It costs a lot of money to run the goat farm property as a farmer's market only. You see the access up there is $442,000 to build a parking lot to have a walking trail around an old field.
Do we
There's
have
no
a use for
trees,
this
there's no
property as a
nothing.
county? Do we have a use for this property as a county rather than a park?
The goat farm or Thistle?
Goat farm or Thistle?
Well, so Thistle, I would say, there's also another parcel that was purchased that was thought of as a potential access, which topography.
Well, I consider those to be the
Yeah,
same property.
it's not on the map, though, I just want to make sure,
It is on
there's
the
actually,
map.
is it the
It
multiple
is.
parcels?
Yeah.
Got it, okay. So there's multiple parcels that would be.
The property line is right here,
And-
but this is one property.
And two, just as a reminder, Thistle, if you're looking at this one, this bottom parcel that has the pond on it is what's under conservation easement. The Teeb here does not have a conservation on it, on that 13
Right.
acres. Goat Farm does not have a conservation easement, on that, but Wood End does.
Yeah, so in terms of goat farm, because of the size and what it was bought for and what funding it was bought with, there's limitations of what else we should use it for. So I think in terms of parks, Scott, maybe you could answer, you know, the committee's question in terms of use of those two properties. In terms of, because I think the question was, what do you see as the potential use for goat farm and Thistle?
He said outside of parks, though.
Yeah.
So I think the
Outside.
answer to that is, we can't, we definitely need a space someday for our utilities department to locate. But because of what, the funding and the easements that were created, and obviously Goat Farm doesn't have the same ones, I don't think that would be advantageous for us, but we can wait to see what the county attorney says.
You would have to sell it to the county. County would sell it to itself.
Then we have to buy it from the tax district.
And I will mention one other recollection I had about the bonds. I think the bonds, it's not that long before they expire.
Yeah,
or
they're
they're paid off, you know, maybe 2030, I think Kevin told me. So if you can rest on a little deferred gratification. But, yeah, I'd just be sensitive to not only what it creates with IRS, but we've got a AAA bond rating, and we need to use where they have a badge of honor.
Well, here's what, I don't want to burden the rest of the county with what a small portion voted on.
So where is staff on these two parks, on Thistles and Goat Farm? Would you all agree with what Chairman Litton is saying? I'm putting you on the spot, but your opinion matters.
I think that's a complicated question. Obviously, Catherine, you know, if she wants to share, I think from our perspective, what I would say is we've got these concept plans, okay? And anytime you build a park, you want to make sure the concept plan, you do a thorough engagement process and it's representative of the entire community. And as I've reviewed the process, I can't say that that occurred. And so if we're going to activate these parks, you know, as the county manager, what I would tell you is we should redo the engagement opportunity to think about what would go on these. And so I think that's where you would start. So
it seems like you should invest the money in Wood End first and get it up and going in a phased approach that could accommodate.
But I
even-
still think the uses need to be looked at, because to his point, there wasn't the public input on these specific properties done as part of these concept plans were developed. Does that make sense? So if you go back and you review the Catawba Bend master plan, there was a whole public engagement piece for that property, specific to that property, specific to the amenities and the uses that the public wanted to see on that property. And outside of, you know, some comments once these were posted, I mean, that wasn't really part of this
Can you
project.
back up to the map?
Sure.
With the, I'd also like to point out.
Like the
how-
park map?
Yes, how densely, how dense all those parks are in one little area. And all the money from a county tax would go to one small area instead of being distributed. If you had a whole county master plan, which is what so for phase two, when we get into the farther parts of the park district, we would have another master plan done that would show us where we would need to buy properties to be most beneficial. And I guarantee that if we didn't have those, the consultant's not gonna say, let's put 4 parks within a mile of each other.
Right. If we unwind the tax districts, the question is where would you put the other parks? Obviously, when we talk to Fort Mill and TGK, they'd like to see something on the other side of the river.
Right.
And I've heard that. So that's an opportunity. South of Rock Hill is an opportunity. Out west is an opportunity besides Wolf Mountain. But we would want to do another study with the consultants because that was a level of the
And again, that study would also, as a partnership with our municipal friends, we could look and see what they have and partner with them. We don't want to, again, compete with them, and we don't want to duplicate what they already have.
Something on 161 makes a lot of sense too, in between Catawba Bend and Worth Mountain.
Yeah, and so to answer the question about that was asked, I think what we would say is if you want to focus on one part, that allows you to do more, but we would still want to study the use. I think engaging with the Bethel Lake Wiley Board, obviously they want to see one of these parks accessible, and I can't blame them for that. And so maybe there's something at Wood End we can do to get it accessible quickly and provide that access in a meaningful way, and then do an engagement process to better develop a concept plan like we did at Catawba Bend. And then that would be I think that would be the closest to where we're at as staff, but we haven't as a recommendation, but we haven't, I think our recommendation is more dependent on what y'all think we should do with all of the land, and then we will give you a recommendation, if that helps.
Does your bare bones for Wood End include tearing down the house and destroying the structure out there? Or does it include any money to, I guess, safe it up or put security around it?
I want to think that it did include,
Based on,
demoing the house, because we would want to eliminate any risk or liabilities,
Right.
but outside of that, I mean, it was a parking area and trails.
Okay.
based on the cost, I don't think it would include demolition, because I think it would be significant cost to do that. Though it's something that, based on the interior, needs to be
Right.
explored.
And y'all have seen the reports for that?
Yeah, I've been out there, I've been around it.
I've been on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been in the house.
I have not been in the
And
house.
you're
So
still
sum
alive?
up your comments.
No, that house is
Then we
beautiful.
really don't need to make a decision.
It is,
except for
it
Thistles
would
and Goat
hurt my
Farm, assuming
feelings
there's a decision to
bad
be
if it
made.
got torn down.
and you all need to go out to the public and ask the public kind of what they're looking for in their area. Is that correct?
So what I was trying to do was react to kind of what y'all are talking about. I think what we would like from y'all is some direction on the Bethel Lake Wiley Tax District in general. And so out here, we need to give you feedback on what would it take to sell the properties, what are the implications of that. What I was speaking to is it seemed like y'all wanted to learn more about Wood End specifically. And so that's something that the staff, Catherine, can work on and give you more finite numbers on what it would cost. But I was speaking more holistically that the concept plans before you, staff, as I've met with staff, we think those need to be redone before you invest significantly in any of the parcels. Besides Catawba, because there was a lot of work on that. So if you say Wood End, we'll say, we'll go work on a more in-depth concept plan, but here's what we can do first so that everybody has access to that part. If that makes sense.
And part of that would be, we really need to figure out how we're gonna fund these things. We really need the funding source first before we can even tell them what to go after.
Which is why I said we could share what we can do with whatever's left. Right. As a starting
For
point.
Wooding
Sure.
specifically.
Andy, you live in,
I mean, not even a thought.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I know, in Thistle is the dog park. So is that, would you be saying that that would go to Woodland, is the dog park? Because I know a lot of people, that's near and dear to their
Right.
heart is the dog park. And I'm just also going by this, I did find it finally, is the programs for the top priorities for the investment for programs and activities. So the top one is special events, and the second one is markets, which lends itself, I mean, you know, either you have to really make that into the Wood End or like I say, the goat farm I know they've been doing that.
On the Wood End map, Debbie, if you look, there's an event lawn.
Yeah.
And we've heard that from the Bethel Lake Wiley Board that they want that activated, and conceivably that could be the first thing we do.
Like the
with remaining
event lawn
funds.
is what you're saying over here.
It's a good
Yeah.
space, it's flat.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know Catherine's talked a lot about how to get access to that, electrical and whatnot,
mhm.
so.
And the other thing is the amphitheater. I know that was one of the things that was talked about. But then you come on down here and there's the dog park
Right.
on that list.
Mhm.
So, you gonna put everything there?
Well, but that's why we're saying
All
we
of
would
that?
do, we would
Dog
re-engage
park,
about.
the whole thing?
We would
I think
re-engage
you're-
about what should go there.
Right,
You know-
specifically to that property.
to simplify this conversation, I mean, I was questioning this sometime back about accessibility. Now I see 1.3 million, and that was the number probably created a couple months ago, could be higher than that now. But anyway, I could see I would agree with selling this if it's possible to do it, considering the
Thistle.
bonds, Thistle. And then let's talk about what we're doing with the goat farm and Wood End.
Now, if Goat Farm has to stay, it would be a great place for a dog park.
It's visible, it's on
Visible,
274.
it's flat, it's fenced in.
I was gonna ask you, 557 versus 274, I don't live there, you do. Is 557 as active as 274?
Yes,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yes.
So having the dog park or having the market over
Right.
there is really no big deal?
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, I'm just going by
Yeah.
what he said.
Mhm.
You know, or not what he said, but
Well,
what everybody else said.
And one thing that I don't know if the county has thought about, but reading about dog parks in some other areas, there's been a whole bunch of liability concerns and additional staff, you know, they need additional staffing, or quite a bit of staffing, more than normal.
Well, can I ask you a question?
I just
Put you on the
know,
spot.
Ann Springs Greenway,
Yeah.
Yes.
the dog park,
Yeah,
there's a waiting list.
Mhm.
yeah.
you cannot take your dog in because there's a waiting list.
That's true.
I mean, it is the place to go, the happening place to go.
Debbie, how do you feel about suggesting to council that we ask staff to look into selling off Thistle and let's focus on,
Well, I think
The
what Tom
goat farm.
said, you're gonna have to look at the,
yeah, the bond?
IR,
Yeah.
yeah.
So are you
all
okay with that,
what-
Doug?
What you said,
Are we okay coming
before we
out of-
can make a
But are we okay
determination.
coming out of committee today, asking staff to look into that?
Yes.
And we're agreeing, we're okay with selling Thistle, but we need a little bit more information on the goat farm. Obviously, Woodend makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 84 acres, right on
I
557.
mean, that
Are we okay with
pond is
that?
awfully enticing there, but.
And then Freddie, I mean, it's beautiful
It is.
when you go out there and look at it, but, I mean,
beautiful, yeah.
the cost to just get it done.
So I'm comfortable with that being an action item for y'all.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that's
that
gonna be
gets
the
so
main,
further.
main
We need a
thing
motion
right
on that,
there.
right?
Be glad to.
Do you want us to bring more details about costs related to Woodend as well? Operating and capital costs?
I made a note to, I mean, do we wanna bring back, like, what we could get with the remaining funds? Like, if we put all the money, I just need clarification too, yeah.
Well, I mean, we're gonna go to the well for some more money this upcoming year for parks and recreation, so think about what is a legitimate phase one, and come back to us with that proposal.
And I think what I would recommend is we show y'all what you could do with the remaining funds if you put it all on Woodend, and then we show you the total cost of conceivably building out Woodend.
Well, I thought y'all, we said we were gonna have to go back to the public and get public input, so we don't even know what we're gonna build on Wood End.
Right, so we want to give you a framework, right? So,
Right.
and I think the key, when we talk about Bethel Lake Wiley, is trying to give access to one of these parks as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Then doing engagement to build it out.
Yeah.
So, but we want y'all to walk into this knowing the implications of what the full cost of build out could be. And we'll just say to do these things. Those things can change, but I think it's important that we get access to one of these parks and then do the public engagement, just to show that we're committed to building this out.
All right, do you want a motion tonight on Thistle, or do you want to go back and research whether it can even be done before
I
we
don't
make
think
a
we
motion?
can until
No,
this is homework.
I think what we do is we get you a memo from the county attorney.
Okay.
And then y'all might have a more specific motion at the next meeting.
Mhm.
to do with it.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get you that information as
Okay.
soon as we can.
Sounds good. So then, is there anything else at our next meeting you think we need to have related to the
Well,
goat
we're just gonna wait for you guys to come
Not
back with the
for-
information
or
on,
proposal?
you're gonna do
First thing.
Wood End,
Right.
like, see what all we can get done for the amount of money that we
We have
have.
remaining.
And then what would be additional, what we would need additional. And phase it, you're gonna phase it like 1, 2, and 3.
We can present it that way.
Are any of those phase two items gonna be in this upcoming budget?
For Catawba Bend?
Yes.
So I know we're working on recommendations that,
Okay.
and Catherine's put those in the budget, but we'd love y'all's input too. So, yes, it's my intention to put forward at least 1 or 2 of those in the 5-year CIP. The question is what year?
So I will tell you, if I may, so again, the 2 that are in italic, those are grants that we've already committed to. So those matches have to be included over the next year or 2. But the list below that, that's kind of in the order that staff would recommend pursuing based on the infrastructure and things that are already on the property. So if you're considering these list of things, our recommendation is to start with considering construction of the first mile of the Greenway Trail, dam repair, so on and so forth.
So just an example, that first mile is $3 million. And so we think it's important to have that first mile because if people are gonna drive there and park, they're gonna wanna get down the river and walk. And so we're gonna put that in a recommended budget, but we'd love y'all's feedback to think about where in the 5-year plan it falls because that has implications for Woodend, it has implications for our other parks, and it has implications for all the capital projects. And so That's why building out these parks, if we do it right, we need to be very thoughtful about it, and then it has operating impacts too. So, yeah, we're working on that, but any feedback y'all have will help us better develop the budget.
Y'all have anything else? I gotta get you out of here.
Yeah. The only thing in phase two, the disc golf, and I'm all for disc golf, but it seems that music and alcohol pull people to a location.
Well, disc golf's got a grant.
Yep. But I'm just saying in phase two,
Well,
I know we're talking about getting people to the property, you got the hiking trails and the biking trails.
So where's the music and the alcohol?
It's not there,
So the,
it's not on there.
Yeah, and some of these, I mean, they were derived from our recommendations, and we also referred to the phasing of the Catawba Bend master plan.
Right.
So we kind of looked at both of those. We looked at the current infrastructure that's going in, trying to take into consideration if we're to do that amphitheater, where it's located on the map, there's a lot more infrastructure that we've got to build to even get there. So we were just trying to think of things that would be around the area that we already got the infrastructure in place.
On the other side of the park.
Right.
I looked at a plan once before it was Catawba Bend, where a major concert venue wanted to build a concert venue down on the water, and it was unreal. I don't know if we would want to contract with anybody to consider that. I won't even mention the name publicly, but it's pretty magnificent.
the one that's south of here now,
Mm-mm.
talking about that one?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, I'm
We
sorry.
need to close out the meeting,
Okay.
please, so, can I
Yep,
get
we're
a
done.
motion?
Motion to adjourn.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.